All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to break down a fascinating and, honestly, kind of terrifying concept. We've all seen the daily headlines, right? The constant chatter from foundational lab CEOs and tech pundits about AI replacing human jobs. But today, we're looking past those individual anecdotal job losses. We're looking at a recent, incredibly detailed 60-page mathematical paper by professors Gerry Tsoukalas and Falk. They wanted to understand the true macroeconomic danger here. They actually built a massive mathematical model to figure out exactly why companies create AI traps that they themselves absolutely cannot escape. We're talking about the systemic, structural mechanics of why an entire economy might literally automate itself into a corner.
And it all really kicks off with this one chilling question. If every single company fires a massive chunk of their workforce to cut costs using AI, eventually, who is left with enough money to actually buy the products? I mean, think about what this means for your daily life, your local community. You automate the workers, you lose the customers. The real danger we're talking about isn't just a tight job market or having to learn a new piece of software. It's total economic gridlock. We're looking at a scenario where production becomes practically free, but consumption just drops to zero because the paychecks have completely vanished.
Now, here's where we hit a massive paradox. You might be thinking, well, CEOs are rational, right? They're highly educated, smart people. If they see this giant economic cliff coming, they're just going to hit the brakes. But the researchers discovered something deeply unsettling. Even if these CEOs desperately want to avoid an economic crisis, systemic market forces leave them practically powerless to stop it. They understand the economics. They know that getting rid of all the workers means nobody's left to buy the groceries or the streaming subscriptions or the furniture or whatever it is they're selling. And yet, mathematically, they are compelled to keep driving right toward the edge. This isn't just about human greed. It's a structural equation they are completely trapped in.
Section 1. The Widget Thought Experiment. To really understand why this trap happens, without getting totally bogged down in 60 pages of heavy math, the researchers give us this brilliant, simplified thought experiment. Imagine a single, massive company, a total monopoly in a closed market, and let's just say they make widgets, like those little plastic things at the end of shoelaces. And everyone in this entire economy works at this one company. Suddenly, this shiny new AI technology arrives. The CEO realizes, wow, I could adopt this and lay off 90% of my staff. But because they're a monopoly, those exact same workers are the exact same people buying the widgets. So in this isolated scenario, the CEO actually does the right thing. They take their customer base into account, they don't over-automate, and they balance things out perfectly. But we don't live in a monopoly, do we? We live in a highly cutthroat competitive market, and that is where the whole thing changes. Imagine there are 100 different widget companies. When a CEO in a competitive market looks at that exact same cost-benefit analysis of AI, the cost side of laying off workers is basically zero to them. Why? Because their specific workers were only spending a tiny, tiny fraction of their paychecks at their specific company anyway. They were spreading their money around the other 99 widget companies. So the CEO thinks, look, there are plenty of other people around to buy my products. The benefit of saving production costs is huge, and the loss of my own workers' spending power is basically microscopic.
Section 2. The AI Layoff Trap. So, what happens when you zoom out and look at the entire market acting on this exact same competitive logic? Well, it creates what economists call a dominating strategy. This means that no matter what other companies are doing, an individual CEO's absolute best strategy for survival is to adopt as much of this technology as possible. I mean, think about the stakes here. Choosing not to automate is essentially a guaranteed death sentence for a business. If one CEO decides to hold back, maybe to protect their workers out of the goodness of their heart, but all their competitors automate to slash prices, that first CEO simply goes bankrupt. And their workers? Well, they lose their jobs anyway. It's a brutal reality. You are forced to automate or you die. And this is what leads us straight into a devastating domino effect. Step 1. Individual CEOs adopt AI to cut their operational costs. Step 2. All their competitors have to do the exact same thing just to survive the new pricing reality. Step 3. Because every single company across every industry is laying off their workforce, the total consumer demand across the entire economy just completely evaporates. And finally, Step 4. Every single firm ends up completely worse off, sitting in a totally eroded market with absolutely no one left to buy their goods. This isn't just some abstract theory. This is a mathematical certainty if left unchecked. We're talking empty storefronts, closed factories, and a totally paralyzed economy, all born from perfectly rational individual choices. Section 3. The Prisoner's Dilemma.
Now, a very natural question pops up here. Why don't the biggest tech companies just get together in a room and agree to slow things down?
The researchers point out that this is a classic prisoner's dilemma. Let's say the leaders of Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google all sit down at a big table and agree to scale their efforts down. They shake hands. Great, right? Actually, no. The very moment they walk out of that room, the incentive structure takes over entirely. The instant you know your competitors are slowing down, the financial gains you can get from secretly adopting AI and racing ahead become absolutely massive. And because it's a dominating strategy, the fiduciary duty to shareholders legally binds these CEOs to chase that immediate financial reward. They are legally required to maximize returns. That all but guarantees a handshake agreement will be broken. Relying on self-regulation isn't just unlikely here, it's essentially a mathematical impossibility.
Section 4. The Odysseus Solution.
So, if companies mathematically cannot self-regulate, what on earth can we do? To answer this, the researchers take us all the way back about 3,000 years to the ancient Greek epic, the Odyssey. You might know the story. The hero, Odysseus, has to sail his ship past the sirens. These are beings with divine knowledge and music so beautiful that any sailor who hears it is lured to their island, leading to a literal trap where they die. Odysseus knows he won't be able to resist the allure once he hears that music, so he doesn't rely on self-restraint. Instead, he orders his crew to tie him to the mast of the ship, and he gives them strict commands to completely ignore his future screams to be let go. The researchers argue that the overwhelming allure of AI cost savings are today's sirens. Companies simply cannot resist them on their own. They need an external force to keep them tied to the mast.
So what does that external force look like? The researchers reviewed a few popular economic proposals. Things like universal basic income and giving workers equity are super popular in tech circles right now. But the researchers argue these actually fail, and here is why. They don't address the root incentive a company has to replace a worker with a machine. UBI gives people money, sure, which is awesome for the consumer, but it does absolutely nothing to alter the fundamental math on the company side. It doesn't stop the company from firing the worker in the first place. And self-restraint, as we just saw, mathematically proven to fail. What we really need are external sticks and carrots. One highly effective stick would be an AI firing tax. Now, this wouldn't punish companies for augmenting workers with AI, but it would make it heavily costly to fully replace them. Think of it kind of like a carbon tax, which forces companies to finally bear the responsibility for polluting. However, the researchers are realists. They admit the word tax is politically toxic and incredibly hard to implement. So we might also need carrots, like providing government subsidies to firms that actively choose to keep their human workers instead of firing them. The main takeaway here is that the external force must directly alter the cost-benefit math of firing a human being.
Section 5. A 10-year warning. Which brings us to the ultimate stakes of this whole explainer. What actually happens if policymakers ignore these warnings over the next decade? While economists love to debate the future, the mathematical models in this paper point toward a really stark warning. If we do nothing, the technology will absolutely keep improving rapidly. That's a given. That will lead to unchecked, rapid AI job replacement, which in turn creates a tremendous, unprecedented amount of wealth inequality. We're talking levels we have literally never seen before. And historically speaking, massive wealth inequality leads directly to severe political instability. It mirrors, or could even exceed, the systemic shocks we saw during the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, think back to 2008 for a second. That was a scenario completely defined by systemic risk, where individual financial institutions were making rational, highly profitable choices in a vacuum. But collectively, they were creating a massive toxic bubble that no single bank had the power or, frankly, the incentive to pop on its own. We are looking at the exact same systemic, structural risk right now, just with AI and labor instead of subprime mortgages. And that leaves us with a really critical choice. The math shows us exactly why companies create these AI traps and why they absolutely cannot stop themselves from driving off the cliff. The individual incentives are simply too strong to ignore. As the researchers make abundantly clear, sitting around waiting for firms to figure this out for themselves and self-regulate is literally the worst possible plan we could have. It's entirely up to external forces, policymakers, and collective action to provide the ropes. So the big question is, will we tie ourselves to the mast, or are we going to let the sirens pull our entire economy straight into the trop? Definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.